Hero.
Oh,
I don't know where that came from.
oh, I want to be like
Hero.
Rachel.
Look, I have some cleavage, which is not
Like,
typical. It's because I'm pressing them together. I actually
like,
don't really have cleavage, but it's all an illusion. It's a Zoom illusion.
oh, I love that. Well,
Look,
the boobies look very nice and
oh,
juicy.
thank
Getting
you. Well,
booby.
welcome to the Jewcy duo of
Mm,
Getting Juicy. Myself and Hero Prince, Rachel Rose and Hero
mm-hmm,
Prince.
mm-hmm. Hello, hello.
Hello. We have, I'll let Hero explain who we have on the show today, just before we have our little ridiculous banter.
Absolutely. So we have Mike Zaremba here. I'm just gonna make sure my phone is silenced. It is. We are good. Okay, I'm back. So we have Mike Zaremba, who is the one of the co-founders and owners of Float House, which is Vancouver's, I would say, initial float spa, studio of many float tanks and other services, including hot and cold therapy, infrared sauna, and cryotherapy. I'm not sure if they still have it, but they did, and maybe it's now in its own space. But they have a space for self care and healing that is extremely profound to human wellness that
Oh,
I have
yeah.
had the chance to experience in the past before they had when I was there and I was floating quite a bit, I was a float ambassador, which no longer that program is there.
I'm interrupting you because I feel like not everyone might know what the hell what floating is. It's
So yeah,
essentially it's a sensory deprivation tank. So the things that were popular, I think in like the 60s or 70s, that were like out of style for many years, and then all of a sudden just have had a resurgence around, I guess, the early 2010, maybe
yeah,
something like that, or like which is crazy. So, and sorry, I interrupted you, but I just
that's
realized I'm
fine.
like, you're going on
Yeah,
about floating, and I'm only just saying that because I had a flashback.
aha,
I had a flashback to when I first heard the word floating, and I had no
aha.
fucking idea what that even meant. And I was in actually I was in a yoga teacher training at the time, probably just down the street from the first original float house in Gastown.
Yeah,
And I was at I'm just cannibalizing this conversation right now. But just because that flashback of hearing that terminology, and this was maybe like just over a decade ago, and I was like, and everyone I was with were like, oh yes, we know what that is. And, no one even described it to me. And they were all just like, nodding like, oh yeah, that's so cool. That's great, man. And I'm like, to myself, I was like nodding along like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. It
uh,
sounds cool, but I didn't want to be the loser that asked what that was because I was in
yeah.
a yoga teacher training.
I love it. I love it. So yeah,
So
so adding to that, it's a form of rest, REST, restricted environmental stimulus therapy. So essentially, like when you go into a float tank, you are in complete isolation of all the main senses of the body. So seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting,
not
touching.
feeling.
Well,
No.
feeling in terms of like, um, you're not touching anything, and what you're feeling is basically neutral. Like you're in a
Okay.
in a shallow bed of highly salted or ozonated water, basically, giving yourself the ability to remove any sense of presence. Like
Yeah.
you're neutralizing everything that feel like you're just hence the term floating, right?
Yes.
So Mike is one, as I mentioned, one of the co-founders and co-owners of Float House in Vancouver. And it started in Gastown with a 5 tank facility that then became a 9 tank facility, and it became the largest float space in the world with that many tanks, as far as what I've read and understood.
Well, if you didn't see my expression there, if you're not watching this, my eyes went like big freaking saucers because what? I didn't know that. In the
So it was
world?
what in the
At one
world.
point?
Well, from what I remember, the
I have to
original
ask
marketing and
Mike that.
branding,
Mm-hmm.
I remember they were really excited to have the most amount of float um, tanks and chambers in the world at 9, which is
Oh,
phenomenal.
well, because
So
they're not cheap. Like those that operation is really. extreme. And I've done, I did it and I was hooked. It's awesome. It's amazing. I wish I wasn't such a neurotic hypochondriac because now, well, and we'll talk about all this stuff with Mike, because I know like with the pandemic going on, like that must have shut his business down for a while, which is interesting because if we think about it with the salt and the cleanliness, I mean, that's like really killing germs, I think in general. So, but yeah, that's interesting. When's the last time you floated, Hero?
Oh, it's been at least like 5 years, I would say. I haven't floated for a very long time. I definitely miss it. I definitely desire it. I've thought about heading over and getting a membership of some kind, but I haven't yet. But I think sometime in the future, I think I will find myself back in that environment more. It's definitely one of those things that is so powerful to your mental health and well-being, and also physically to your body, because it's literally just hitting pause. And even if the mind might not fully pause in certain ways, the body has an ability just to take a chill, take an opportunity to either be passive or active. So that's the thing, like with floating, you can be completely in there and fall asleep, and then all of a sudden it's like time just floats away. And there's other times where I've gone into the float tank where I've been very active and very stimulated, but it's not necessarily in a negative way. So what I want to say in terms of, like, we were thinking of a juicy question, and how this would pertain to Mike, to floating and stuff. And so I don't know if I'll be able to have necessarily an answer to this, but what would be juicier for you? Would it be the float with drugs or some kind of, I guess, influence, or floating with just your own brain in its own state?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's like, so the past few episodes, we've changed up the juicy questions. So what's juicier, floating, I guess, like to simplify it, floating on drugs or floating with no drugs? And I'm not really the right person to ask about that either, because I have never done shrooms. And I know that like microdosing and all that stuff is like a very popular thing right now, but not just popular, like it works, especially I've heard for mental health. And that's a whole other, oh my God, we could go, you know what, it'd be great to get someone actually on that has a lot of knowledge around that, because that would be a great episode. But yeah, I also don't have enough knowledge, but it's a great question, because I think people do sometimes think of those types of tools or things that people use like floating, and they find it synonymous with, you know, pot, with marijuana, with like some sort of hallucinogenic, because it is kind of it could be looked at as like a woo-woo kind of thing, right? Where people associate it very hippie kind of, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So,
and there comes Mike right now. Perfect. Yeah, it definitely can be considered in that way, but I think that's interesting, is that some people think it's from a different generation, which in some ways it may be, but then you come into this type of era and decade where it's not, and it's become such a very identified form of self-care, wellness, personal development, and also psychic development too.
He's just a teensy tiny, that's a word apparently, a teeny tiny picture.
Yes, indeed. Hey, Mike,
he's just
can you hear us?
A little picture.
Yes, sorry, I'm just getting my background set up here.
It's all
no
good.
Problem. All good.
Yeah.
We're very candid on this podcast. So, and I always, even though I know our guests know that with the email we send out, we're already recording, and I just want to let you know that as well.
Okay, no problem. No problem. I just want to make sure my background is looking stellar for.
Oh, I like it.
Let's see what I want here.
Well, your sound quality is phenomenal, which.
Oh, that's great.
That doesn't surprise me, actually.
Which doesn't surprise me either, because I know you used to have a podcast on your own, or yourself as well.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm just going to be doing this from my phone, but I
Nice.
My phone is good. Let me just trying to find the appropriate background for this.
It's we're part of the sensory deprivation. We're depriving ourselves of sight and seeing him. So.
That's true.
Great, actually. That's great.
It works perfectly.
Yeah. And you know what, though? It's funny, actually, looking at the thumbnail, because it's so small, it kind of reminds me of Adriano a little bit.
What? That's my husband, Mike.
Really?
I don't really see that. I'm sorry. Like, I shouldn't be sorry. I don't know why I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, it's a compliment. Secondly, you look at the damn face every day, and I don't, so that could
maybe. Oh God. Yeah. And Mike, we're only just starting to do these kind of after dark style episodes because we were recording in the morning for quite a while. So
yeah, thanks, Rachel.
No worries. This
Hero wasn't a morning person.
No, not.
No.
Yeah, it takes a couple of cups of coffee to get the brain going some, right?
He doesn't drink
Absolutely.
coffee really either.
Oh,
I drink
problem.
lattes now, but you know,
Okay.
only for a certain period of time.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, let's go with this one here.
Sounds good.
Okay, this better be like the best background I've ever seen.
There we go. Well, let's
drum roll.
upload it. There we
Awesome.
go.
I love this. I love the anticipation.
Totally.
Bear with me, folks. Here we go.
It's all good. If you're listening to this, see, this is where you have to go onto the YouTube channel and actually watch this.
There we go.
Well, oh, yes.
That's hilarious. Love that.
Let me get my lighting a bit better here. Hold on.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's brilliant. Actually, that explains the anticipation.
I love it.
I want to be inside the float tank.
Awesome. That's awesome.
With your dry clothes on, like how is that? Is that a new feature with you guys now?
Yeah, actually, dry flotation thing. There are beds that exist that you can just. They have like a little fabric over top, and then you can just lie in it with your clothes on. So a little less wet and probably just a little more convenience in some ways, but maybe not quite as effective.
Are you pulling my leg? Or are you serious?
I'm serious.
Oh, wow.
I've never been in one. I've never seen one. I've seen them online. But yeah. So
that's awesome.
Very cool.
Awesome. So Mike, I gave a bit of an introduction and Rachel also added her 2 cents as well. One thing we wanted to be really candid about with you and yourself is that in our podcast, we are super candid and we don't necessarily always just want to know about what someone already knows that they're known for, whether it's the industry they work in, if it's the things they've accomplished, because everyone asks those questions. Everyone wants to know about those things, and it can be sometimes meaningful, but also a little bit repetitive or predictable. So we always love to let our guests know that whatever they're comfortable going into about how they got to where they are and who they are in their daily life, the things that maybe they don't know about them, regardless of how in-depth or how superficial it might be, it doesn't really matter. So let this be a place for you to just open up and share whatever makes sense for you in the moment. And we will follow your lead as we have that open, candid dialogue as well.
Okay. Cool. That sounds good. No, I mean, I haven't done a podcast in, oh my goodness, it's been at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Well, about 2 years. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited. So thanks for the invite.
Awesome.
No problem.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you. So where are you calling in from? I'm like, how old am I? Caller, where are you? You're in your car?
I'm in my van. Hence the need for a background. No, I was trying to meet up with somebody. My kids are at my parents' place right now, so I'm just in their parking lot. And so it'd be probably less invasive to do it here than to have little kids outside the door trying to get to daddy. So
makes sense.
Absolutely.
How many kids do you have right now?
I have 2 boys. Yeah, I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So
wow, amazing! Yeah. It's an incredible thing that you're married. You got a incredible partner. You're a father. Like time just has flown by. It seems like
definitely a new era for me.
Yeah.
So with that, okay, well, I mean, might as well just kind of dive right. No pun intended. Dive right in here to the tank. Dive right into the convo. Well, Hero, something that I just don't want to forget to ask, because Hero said something before you hopped on. He said, and it could be wrong, but at one point, the Float House had so many tanks that you had the biggest facility with the most amount of tanks in. He said the world, but I don't know. That's pretty.
Yeah, I think we did.
Is that true?
Yeah,
Wow.
Gas had at one point 9, as a single location, had 9 tanks going, and I think that was the largest that I was aware of in the world. When we first started in 2013 with that location, there was not that many float centers around in operation. And we didn't open with 9. We grew to 9 about a year and a half in. So around mid 2014, roughly, was when we had 9 going out of the one center. And then that was the largest to my knowledge. And then one opened up in LA that had 10. So
do they know? They're like Hollywood North. No.
Oh yes. Purpose. I talked to the guy at the Float conference several times. He's a great guy. He's just like, well, we had to do 10. I'm like, oh, that's. But So, but since then we've actually shrunk our floating. We've actually done a little bit of diversification, and we offer at Gastown 6 floating rooms, like 4 cabins and 2 tanks, and then we have RMT, hot cold contrast, and a sauna as well. So just a little bit other healing modalities to kind of stack the wellness, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredible that you've been able to diversify that as well, not just to stay with what's happening in the industry, but what's happening with the communities and the general needs of the population as well. And also even introducing them to one that might get them to another. So I remember you had cryotherapy briefly in the space, and it was kind of a partnership or renting out a space. So that's what I wasn't sure if that was still part of your space. And now knowing your list, it's currently or not part of your space, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Cryo was with us for about a year and a half, I'd say. Unfortunately, Vancouver Coastal Health deemed it too dangerous, so he able to continue operating, which is unfortunate, really, because it in my personal opinion, I felt it was extremely safe and very effective, and people really enjoyed it. It wasn't his operation. There was just a random case in Las Vegas that spooked them, I guess, and so. He ended up moving to Toronto, and he's still trying to get back in operation in Vancouver, but red tape takes time. So.
Oh my gosh. And speaking of red tape, so let's take it back to, and we already, talked in the beginning before he came on of, what is floating. We kind of went over all that kind of stuff. So we don't really necessarily have to, but I even said to Hero, there was a time when it first did come out again in about 2013 when you guys opened. And I was just telling a bit of a story. I was actually at Ryan Lear's teacher training, one of his trainings, and people were talking about this floating. And I was just saying how I tried to play it cool, oh yeah, I know what that is, but I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I had to look it up after. So with that being said, what was it like, getting into an industry, or, to kind of re-educate people as to what it was, or even to get, I would almost assume that there was maybe, stigma is the wrong word, but a predisposed idea of what it was because of how popular it used to be with hippies. And what was that whole beginning stage like? I can't imagine how.
Basically, you take every emotion you've ever experienced and wrap it into a ball, and that's what it was like. I mean, now it would have down in its pains and its triumphs, and it's ongoing. It's still a journey that we're on, obviously. And but in terms of the beginning, it was really, it was fascinating to be on the grassroots level of this reemergence of floating. Basically, floating did have an era of popularity in the 70s and 80s, kind of died off in the late 80s, early 90s for a couple of different, reasons that people have cited that I've talked to historically. And then really it kind of came back primarily, in my opinion, because of the Joe Rogan podcast. Joe Rogan actually he's been a floater for years, even prior to the podcast. And obviously when that blew up, and just the nature of his show being such a generalized talk show, would come up conversations from time to time, and it just took off from there. And then there's this one video in particular that someone just mashed up on YouTube of one of his rants about floating, and it was just a very good video, just very inspiring, put to music and stuff. So it was this very intoxicating, and that's what I kind of got triggered onto it. This is probably 2010, I'd say. And so getting involved with it, just personally wanting to explore it myself, and then realizing there's no opportunity here to try that, so we had to go through a huge education process, because at that time not many people, but thankfully that podcast of Rogan's podcast was on this exponential curve of popularity, And so, you know, that did a lot of help. It really, you know, spread the word quite a bit. But like you said, people did have a lot of misperceptions of what's the experience like, what it's
Yeah.
used for. Like Rogan talked about it from a very like, you know, I was like doing a psychedelic, but without doing a psychedelic, you know, so everyone's like,
Right.
oh, on the float tank, am I going to have this mushroom trip experience? And that's, you know, it's not that you can't have very, very unique dream experiences in the float tank. That definitely is a part of the lexicon, but it's, you know, it's not probably, I'd say, the norm for the first timer, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Yeah.
Get people on the same level of what to expect, that this is a practice. We approach it as a practice. We started using that sort of languaging very early on to say, like, you know, there's a skill to it, and there's a personal
Yeah.
relationship that you develop with the space, and you need to go through that your own unique process of what that is for you. And some people will go in there, one float, connect right away, have this very like, wow, that was incredible, and other people will go in the first time and they have to get out after 10 minutes, you know, so you have literally the full spectrum of experience between, you know, getting out after 10 minutes and or even just people, it's like, I'm never going in that thing ever, you know.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to kind of you know, bring back to reality those the mushroom trip seeking people, and then also encourage and support that process of someone that's really curious but very apprehensive about going to the space. So, and everything
sure.
in between, right? So it's it
Yeah.
definitely has to develop a lot of my communication skills and how to approach it from every unique perspective.
So how did you approach it personally then? Were you approaching it from what angle? Because like just speaking for myself, for me, it was not really that psychedelic experience that maybe I was looking for. We both talk a lot about mental health on this podcast, and we both have been mental health warriors. I like to use that word now for many years, whether it be anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things. And that's why I went to float, is because I was looking for another tool in my toolbox to help my anxiety. So I'm just
Right.
curious where, like, you know, it sounds intriguing, like a great business idea and stuff, but personally, how did you kind of come to it, or how did it help you, I
Yeah.
guess?
I was definitely drawn to the altered states of consciousness perspective. I've been practicing yoga for several years before that, really got into meditation, and I wanted to explore the tank space. You know, conceptually, for me, when you know, take away all perceptions of external stimulation, then you're really just left with your inner being, you know, your
Mhm.
thoughts, your feelings, the physical sensations of your body, your breathing, and just being in that really intimate experience with yourself. And then but then being in that environment, allowing the nervous system to relax so deeply. And that's the thing, like that's the unique thing about this environment, is that it allows your nervous system to get such a deep state of relaxation, a very unique state, very different from sleep. Really, doesn't replace sleep;
Mhm.
it's just different from sleep. But yet, then you start to work with your own, you know, your consciousness, really, of just like experiencing what that process is like from a meditation perspective. And
Yeah.
that's what I was really into and curious about. I've you know, I was never, yeah, I haven't had any like mental health diagnosis personally. So, you know, I was more just from like a curiosity, consciousness exploration kind of perspective. But that's not to say I didn't, and I still don't get tremendous like just mental health benefits from it. You know, like especially this past
Absolutely.
year and a half,
Whew.
been a wild ride for everybody in their own way, right? And so been really just relying on that space to, you know, just keep me going in different ways, you know, in terms of quelling anxiety and just tension and stress and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Well, and you make a good point as well. As you know, we're all different brains, we're all wired differently as people. So that makes a big difference in what draws someone to any outlet, any kind of activity, any kind of experience, and to each their own. But what I'm curious about is that, you know, you've been practicing yoga and meditation for a little bit. How did you end up getting on that path of your own self-awareness, for lack of better terms? You know, when did that start for you in your life?
You know, it's funny. I think it kind of started early on in my undergraduate university days. And actually, I think it kind of the catalyst was heartbreak, really. My first
Mhm.
girlfriend, that separation, just the pain from that, you know, of like, with that, you know, that heartbreak, that first heartbreak is at least for me, it was really rough, you know. And then just kind of being open to other I don't know, just like, actually, to be honest, it was The Secret. That, remember that book and the movie The Secret? It was the movie I
Oh, yeah.
watched. My dad introduced it to me, which is funny because he's like the most non-spiritual guy I know. Sorry, a train's going by right now, so bear with me, everybody. But
Can't even hear it.
no,
Nope, not yet.
not. So and there's a few chapters in that book that really started to just like open me up to a different awareness of you know, energy and life, and just a different perspective that I'd never really been exposed to before. I did not grow up with any sort of religious background. My parents never really spoke of spirituality in any sense like that. And so it's just kind of this like natural organic process for me of just, you know, being curious about something and then following that end. And then so that just led to different books to read. I did a big solo backpacking trip after I graduated, and that was quite, you know, just traveling alone is very reflective, seeing different cultures, doing lots of reading and journaling, and then got into yoga and meditation. So I just kind of started to, you know, again, like, yeah, it's just a process of self-discovery and self-relationship discovery with reality, with being, with this whole existence that we find ourselves in, you know?
Yeah. So you weren't like necessarily influenced by somebody. It was you kind of on your own accord.
Yeah. Well, and
This...
another experience I had was I was watching the movie What the Bleep Do We Know?
Oh, and that for ages.
Yeah, either. I haven't said it in ages, but I was watching that, and there's something at the end of that movie that, like, there's a line or two. I was watching in my brother's bedroom by myself with the lights off, and I don't remember what the line was, but there's something at the end. It was just like very impactful. I just like, it was one of the last little lines of the whole thing, and the movie stopped, and I just closed my eyes and I kind of went into whatever that meaningful you know, line was, and I just had this sort of like, yeah, it was just like an expansive experience. Okay, like it was like tapping to like the calm, like kind of going into myself in a meditative way, but induced by watching that film, kind of setting that up for myself in the dark room, and just having that experience of like, let's go on, what is this, you know, what is this experience I'm having as a human being? And so it just kind of, that was like one of the first sort of experiences I can recall having, that sort of like, you know, I don't know what you call it, like a transcendent experience. It wasn't, but I'm still there, but it's just like I'm experiencing myself in a unique way. Yeah, that's how I describe it.
Okay, amazing. This is sort of like a bit of a tangent, but didn't the guy that direct that isn't he involved with Nixium?
What's Nixium?
Oh gosh, okay, we won't get into this.
Okay.
it's like that's a whole Nixium was this cult, like crazy cult that actually, like, a lot of it was based in Vancouver. There was a documentary on it that came out not that long ago, and there was like some of the actors from Smallville were really heavily involved in this, you know, kind of bettering yourself type, ended up being like this cult. Anyway, we won't get into it, but I think that the guy that made that movie was a part of the cult, but he was one of the guys that got out, and he's got a very fascinating story. Anyway, he's a really cool guy, the guy that created that.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a very unique film for me to watch. I'd never seen anything like it, or kind of just opened my eyes to different things, and just opened my mind a little bit, you know, in a way that I've never opened it before. And that, you know, and then I just kept following that thread in different ways throughout my life, just kind of being open to it. And then, you know, floating found its way into that. Shamanism found its way into that. And then meditation, yoga. Those are like my kind of 4 pillars of my own personal spiritual practice. But I mean, you know, ultimately, like anything's the teacher, everything's the teacher. You know, it's just like, what awareness do you bring into any moment at any time? So.
Well said. Yes.
Yeah. And in terms of the pandemic and how the last kind of year and a half or two have been for you, I'm curious, me and Rachel were both curious kind of to know how has it affected you and your lifestyle and also as a business operator and in a place that is supposed to cultivate serenity and wellness and introspection. Um, have you found that it's been a gradual way of figuring out how to kind of make it happen and keep going through? Have you found it's been extremely stressful? What are some of the lessons or takeaways that have happened through that process of revisiting your business model?
I mean, yeah, it's been extremely stressful. Especially last summer when we were locked down and didn't know if we were going to make it through. Not really getting a lot of support in terms of like different types of aid out there. It's funny how certain businesses qualified for certain things, other businesses did not. And it was, I mean, and obviously in hindsight, you can pick apart the inefficiencies of different things, but in the moment, they're just, people are trying, you hope that people are trying to do their best. And, so we were on the brink, but ultimately remaining open was the best choice. And so, we went back into it with just, well, if we don't do this, then we're going to get extremely hurt financially, and that's going to dramatically impact our families. And so we had to just kind of go into it with everything we had, which wasn't a lot because we didn't have any financial resources. It was just like, okay, what can we do here? And, that's why we started the diversification process more intensively. And then we did different, we added the hot cold contrast therapy, and we did a crowdfunding kind of campaign to do that because we didn't have the capital to do it. So thankfully there was a demand for it. People got on board. We were trying to use was it not GoFundMe, but one of those crowdsourcing platforms, but our use case wasn't applicable. So we just had to do it through our channels and just like hope that people trusted us, that we would follow through on this, you know what I mean? And they did, and it was incredible. And so since we've kind of reopened, there has been tremendous momentum, actually. A lot of people, I think, use this reflection of health and this disease that's going around to be reflective on, well, what's their state of health? What are they doing with their own lives? And I do see there's like a movement of personal responsibility towards health. And there's just immunology health, but then there's also like your mental health. And, this is a very intense existential experience, I think, for everybody, whether they're aware of it or not. I think this is massively existential, not because necessarily the threat of death, but just like how all encompassing this thing was for the whole society. And so it's been, we reopened, had people come right back, all the previous members came right back to us, and then more people kept showing up, and so it's been very strong. And we use that time also to try to make our business as efficient as possible. We really didn't have a choice, so we had to make it as efficient as possible, while still staying true to our core of what we were offering and not sacrificing the quality of our, of the core of our service, which is floating, and just the service itself of maintaining the best quality floats that we can. But how can we make this business more efficient? So asking people to bring their own towels, like it is less. The one is a sanitation thing for our staff, is like, let's not have them handling as much towels for a hygiene perspective. And then also it's just people can bring their own towel and bring it home with them, you know what I mean? Like share that goes a long way for us. Like one towel that people bring is like, we have to do dozens and dozens of laundry. So it's just trying to think of creative ways that either we're going to survive or not. I mean, I do respect free market economics in a lot of ways, because either it's going to work or it's not. And if people value it enough, then they're going to support it, if they want to. So I think there's elements of truth in that. And so far so good. Like, here we are. And it's and thankfully, we being a personal service establishment, we don't have to turn anybody away. Like everyone can come float with us. We don't have to verify for vaccinations, which isn't
Right.
a bad thing, but it's just we need every help we can get. And so, you know,
Right.
if it is a 10% population that's not vaccinated, well, we need that 10%. And you could argue
Right.
that our demographics of health conscious people, there might be even a slight skewing to less vaccinated people. And so that's going to hit us harder as a health and wellness business. You know, so, and I'm not going to go into that whole rabbit hole, but, you
Yeah,
know,
please don't.
we couldn't
Yeah.
take a percent clientele loss. You know what I mean? Like we can't
Yeah.
afford to do that. So thankfully we weren't mandated to verify vaccinations, and we can just, you know, anyone that wants to come and float can. And so it's been very important for us.
That is, well, I'm very happy to hear the happy ending. I mean, I know the ending is not here, but you know what I'm saying? I'm really happy to hear that. I also wonder, but I know that especially now, because we were talking a few minutes back about, you know, how sensory deprivation and, you know, I mean, I need to like throw this away sometimes. Like now more than ever with all the shit that's going on in the news and just, it's so overwhelming. People need things like your services more than ever now. Are you noticing? I mean, I can't only imagine the people that are coming in. Are you noticing that there's more angst? Are they more appreciative? Are they more like, is there more emotion? Is there, like, how is that?
I say I would definitely say that sentiment is there. I'd say that we're getting people expressing their gratitude for this space that exists and is supporting them in different ways. And granted, you know, we have people come in for all different reasons, you know, people that come and float from like, whether it's migraines and post concussion syndrome stuff, all the way to obviously mental health issues, and then just chronic pain and muscle tension, you know, like there's lots of different reasons why people come and float. And, but people, I think, you know, so something like this too, like, you know, we're not on insurable benefits. People pay money to come use this service. They dedicate the time to come down and see us and use this space. And so I don't know, there's a lot of reciprocal gratitude going back. Obviously, we're so grateful for them to come and use the space. And they are expressing a lot of gratitude that we exist, a unique space for them to come and, yeah, like you said, disconnect, take a pause, slow it down, breathe, be, and you know, and check in. You know, like this has been a very confusing time in a lot of ways, and you need to process that. You know, like you need to give yourself space, time, however that is, whether it's in a float tank or not, in nature or whatever, but time alone to kind of settle the nervous system and see what's kind of constantly bubbling up to that's, you know, maybe needs your attention, or you haven't integrated it yet. And so this is just one of a great, I think, one of the best spaces to do that, you know, in any float tank, not just at our center, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, lots of gratitude. It's been great, you know, and we're very, very lucky for that. So
well, I think Vancouver has a really close knit, amazing, holistic community. I feel like that really exists. And I think you saw that with people supporting you and, you know, you getting back on your feet. So that's really awesome to see and to hear. And one thing I want to dive into, because we haven't really talked about it at all, is getting in business with your brother, because you were with a family member, or just, you know, talking about the business. We've talked a lot about, you know, the spiritual aspect and, you know, all the great things, the benefits that come along with floating. But were you a business savvy? Were you a business guy? Like, do you have any experience?
I got into small business through a family business, a coffee shop that my parents started in 2001. I joined the business in 2009, and my brother was in the business in 2008. And so once we started to work together there, that's how we learned small business. And
can I ask where that was? Because I'm from Vancouver too.
Vancouver, yeah, in North Vancouver. We run a Tim Hortons location, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you run the one on Marine?
No, we don't. Hopefully,
I just like all my high school freaking memories, or just after high school, was like 24-hour Timmy Hose all the time. Like,
there you go.
All the time, 3 a.m, whatever.
No, like in Canadian communities for sure. And, you know, so that's what taught us small business, and we spend a lot of time working together there. But and as we learned small business, we were naturally pretty open guys, and I guess we would just like shoot ideas back and forth, and definitely this was the time, again, 2009, 2010. Podcasting were just kind of exploding, so we kind of would we talk about different ideas we saw on podcasts and stuff like that. And then floating came into our well, we were looking at other businesses too. We just started to like think about what kind of businesses can we do. We'd analyze businesses and like kind of like try to understand like how they would like what was good about them, what could it be improved. So just always, it was just like something we were interested in. Is once you learn about something and kind of get involved, you can't not see it anymore. And so but then we came across the floating in general, and just the entrepreneurship wheel started turning, and we just decided to go for it. We just kind of worked together, created a business plan, found investors, and went forward from there. And naturally we both have different strengths and different weaknesses, and so I think we know each other quite well to play off on that. And actually before that time too, when we first started working together at Timmy's, we started to do martial arts together, jujitsu. And
wow.
and it's an amazing martial art, and it's a grappling martial art for people that don't know. And so we'd be grappling all the time in this very controlled manner. And to be honest, we worked through like a lot of like our maybe subconscious sibling angst or through this physical grappling, because we would get very intense with that, but then we'd have to reconcile it the next day at work, or or after the sparring session or whatever. So awesome. It was a very interesting kind of therapeutic tool that helped us to just work through any of our stuff that was unaddressed from and improved our communication, and gave us opportunities to improve our communication. And I think that's what's really helped us remain strong throughout the last almost 10 years now.
Oh my gosh. So you're still partners.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. Working with family members and that long of a relationship. It's
impressive. A double-edged sword. Like, you have to have the right relationships and levels of communication to make it doable. But if you do, then it's like, who can you trust more, and who can you like if I need to go on vacation or whatever, I'm like, well, it's in the best possible hands that I can think of, and vice versa. So you can start to get some synergy out of it, quite a bit, because you have like such a, reliable, trustful bond. It goes beyond business. It's because it's family.
That's true. And plus, you saw it growing up. You grew up with family business, so that's also
right. Yeah. Well, my parents were actually teachers before they got into business, so we kind of had the public side of it, and then they went that later in their careers. And so it was kind of a new thing for our whole family, getting into small business quite later on in life. I was a young adult at that time, and they were in their middle age. So yeah.
Yay, you can change at any time, folks.
That's it. It's true. You never gonna happen, wherever you're at right now, in any situation, like, this too shall pass. Things will always change. That is the only constant, so that's for never know what life is going to bring you. Just follow the thread.
Yeah. Well, and also what I think is really amazing is that there are lots of local Vancouver-based businesses that are very small, started out very small, maybe some that are still the same size, but have gained in followership and commitment and loyalty and stuff. And I think it's nice to know that you and your brother are two other pioneers within the community of health, wellness, food and beverage, yoga, meditation. Like, there's a lot of people that can be putting this on the map and say, hey, in our lifetime and our legacy, whenever we go, we can say that we contributed and we were a part of this next generation of people, and contributing to their own personal development, their own wellness, their own mental health. And to say like, hey, like, what do we do with our lives? Well, we accomplished all of these things, and you're so still in the beginning of this journey in some aspects. And so what I'm curious to know is, like, have you given thought to what you would like to see happen in the future, what you would like to see happen for your own personal life, your own professional life, and how that might look like with your brother and your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's hard to look too far ahead. I'm not going to lie, because you can get really dug down into the details of running, brick and mortar small businesses. But so I'm pretty focused on that kind of stuff right now, just because that is my life. And obviously I got my young family that I'm, raising. But I mean, I know that for sure, like, that the last 10 years, like, the amount it's taught me, not only about myself, but just about life and small business and community in general is like, you can't buy that education.
Oh,
Like the School of Hard Knocks is just, invaluable. And like, and fear is a part of that, and success is a part of that, and so I don't know what the future holds. I definitely, I'm always attracted to health and wellness. I think there's other areas that I would be interested to getting involved with, whether it's sort of like retreat centers of some sort of nature.
oh,
I was on the board of MAPS Canada for a couple years, and was very inspired by what's happening, the work of what's going on there, and that whole movement. I think psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is going to be absolutely revolutionary for the human race. That's what I believe, over the next
yes,
15 years.
yes.
I think it's an X factor that people, like, unless you've had those types of experiences, you don't even know how powerful it can be and how transformative it's going to be. And as a collective going through that, properly, with intention and care, and guidance and respect, and all of that, I think it's going to be tremendously, I don't know, evolutionary. It's going to really heal a lot of problems that
Yes.
I see. So I don't know if my future has elements of that in it, but definitely inspired by that. I've had personal experiences that really shake you to your core, and I think it can be tremendously serving for so many people. So we'll see.
Okay. Okay, I have a few questions now then, because that's funny. We were going to maybe go down that road of psychedelics potentially. I mean, that's like, I guess, maybe that's one of the first questions you get asked. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's like, oh, can you, like, is it okay if I'm on drugs? Will I go float? Do you do that? Like, is that a pretty common conversation that you have with people?
Less
Perhaps.
common than you think.
Okay.
I think people, will experiment on their own. Obviously, we don't condone that at
Of course.
all, for liability purposes. However, like, we're not really regulated in that sense, but obviously safety is primary. And so
Yes.
I always want to encourage people to be safe, to be responsible, because, like, yeah, I mean, floating can be, you don't, my personal opinion is, you don't need anything. Okay. Floating, if you're able to let go enough, floating can be as intense as anything of that nature,
Yeah.
period. And so you can just work with that environment and work with yourself. Now, that being said, people do experiment for sure. I've experimented.
Yeah.
And so, and, I think you have to just kind of take each experience, whether it's with a substance or not, um, very, I mean, just very personally, and
Yeah.
don't compare it to anything else, and just take it, um, for what it's willing to. I mean, I think everything comes down to intention. Okay, so what is your intention? Why are you doing something? Do you have a good why, or are you just like, I just want to see what this is like? Well,
Yeah.
maybe you can go a little deeper than that. You know what I mean? And so, I think having a good, clear intention, and also being really smart is kind of part of the best practice with all that kind of stuff. But I
Yeah.
mean, it happens. We haven't had any bad issues, or any negative experiences. But so it's natural. I mean, human beings, and I think
Yes.
not, and all animals explore altered states of consciousness.
Mhm.
Okay, like, that's something that's throughout the animal kingdom. And so, there's nothing wrong with that. Just because we have,
No.
I personally, laws that have made it illegal to personally alter your own state of consciousness with a substance. I mean, obviously it's a double-edged sword. And I'm not talking about narcotics. I'm not talking about things like heroin and crack and meth and things like that. I'm talking about like spirit plant medicines. They're very different things, but they're kind of lumped together historically. And
I
so,
know. And being responsible, and again, intention behind
yeah,
what you're
and also
doing.
learning history and the cultures
Yeah.
that these medicines are from too, and like their
Mhm.
cultural difference, and like, so we're living in a very interesting time, um,
Mhm.
as a species, being globalized, being hyper connected digitally, but yet, our sense of tribal community is very different now. Like we're
Yep.
such a hodgepodge of a species in different ways. We kind of cover everything. But it's almost like, in that uh, exponential growth is a chaos that we have to bring a new order to, within ourselves first, and primarily getting
Mhm.
comfortable in our own existence and having those connections that are really important internally and externally. And so it's a very, I mean, I don't have nothing else to compare it to, but it seems like it's a very bizarre time to be a human being. uh
Yeah,
yeah,
probably. I think
Mhm.
I personally, I think that we almost have too much at our fingertips. First of all, like there's too much. We have access to too many things, and it gets very confusing. And even when culturally speaking, I mean, we could take like this little bit from this culture, and that's wonderful. But it also is very overwhelming. And also, then where again with regulations and things like that, like you're saying, like where does one thing start or one thing end? How I do think that in the near future, even microdosing, like mushrooms, I think are going to be like legal sooner than we know it, especially in BC.
right.
How does that kind of filter down towards businesses or what you do? I don't know. I mean, I you would know better than I would, but I feel like we still have a lot of red tape perhaps to jump through in that respect.
And I think those things will be regulated in certain ways. Like they'll only be
Hmm.
professionally administered through, therapists that are trained. However, there's going to be obviously like personal exploration with these things. I mean, it's already happening. Like, gosh, it
Yeah.
happened all the time. I mean, mushrooms are very common, but I think
Yep.
people, and it's definitely a growing movement of people becoming much more respectful of these medicines and their experiences that they offer, and doing them in maybe more intentional ceremonial ways versus just saying going to Wreck Beach and doing some mushrooms, like.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, but also too, it's like who's anyone to judge how somebody wants to do something. I do really, as long
That's
as you're not
true.
anybody else, well, either you're gonna learn a beautiful lesson, or you might learn a hard lesson, or we're all like, you know life is so subjective in so many different ways, and it's like you got to really watch not to be too judgmental, because you wouldn't do something a certain way, or it's like, oh, they should be having more reverence for this or something like that. Well, look,
That's true.
they're just on their path, like you have to kind of honor, respect where people are at, and obviously, but hold yourself to the highest standard you can, and as much as you can, with compassion, obviously. But so
Absolutely.
I have my opinions on things, obviously, and that's fine to have your own opinions, but also like people are on their own path too, and they're gonna have to learn their way through this life as well, just as we all have, right? So
Mhm.
Absolutely.
But out of all this dialogue, what I'm wondering a little bit of, and I'm sure that I don't think they would be combined, but has there been any businesses that have tried to combine cannabis and floating? Considering how like cannabis is so legal now, like people have cannabis shops everywhere, it would make a kind of different substance, different stimulation, but some people correlate the two things together, getting a natural high. Have people asked you about that in terms of not you doing it specifically with Float House?
right,
Has there been people that have thought, what if these two things went together and they were under one roof or something
right.
like that?
I mean, there's nothing like formally structured in that way that I'm aware of.
Mhm.
However, I mean, yeah, cannabis and floating can go very well together. They're very complementary, and that's whether you're, vaping, smoking, or ingesting. But they can also, and this is my, I mean, so yeah, I mean, there's nothing too much on the radar, but people do that. Probably the most common out of anything is
Mhm.
combining cannabis with floating. And I've done it. I mean, gosh, I've probably floated just as many times with cannabis as I have without.
Yeah.
So I have lots of experience with it, but and ultimately, like whenever you're working with any sort of like plant medicine of that nature, it really comes down to what's your own relationship to it, and again back to intention. Why are you using it? And trying to also check your own, you know, like we're really good at tricking ourselves and lying to ourselves in different ways to justify certain things of why I'm doing something or why I think I need this, and so I've at times had relations with cannabis where I felt it wasn't serving me, and other times where I felt it was incredibly epiphanic and beautiful and healing and connecting. So, I think it's just, it's important to remember that, kind of like just how it, just be aware of your relationship to something like that, whether you're using it inside a float tank or not.
Yeah.
And, because again, we're really good at tricking ourselves sometimes too.
Absolutely. It's so funny that we're talking about this, because just before you popped on, we tend to ask our guests. For a while it was a silly question by the end of our podcast, but we've changed the question, and now it just it more pertains towards each individual guest. So the question for you, which I feel like you might have already answered, is what is juicier, floating on drugs or floating without drugs? But it's interesting because you said you've done both almost an equal amount of time. So I wonder, is there a preference for you?
I'd say without, for me personally. When I have like let's say a really deep float experience without, I'd say it's usually just it's just better person. It's just better. What does that mean to me? To me, that means like it was just a little bit like especially like I'll just use cannabis as an example. The energy of cannabis can actually at sometimes prevent me from going deeper. It's like it almost holds. It's like that energy it has its own unique vibration, and when you ingest cannabis, you're kind of going to be in that vibration of cannabis. Okay, merge your vibration. And it can sometimes prevent me from, let's just say, going deeper again, whatever that means subjectively, right? But that's just how I call it. Whereas when I'm just mic vibration and go into that as deeply as I can, I find that's just more profound. I find it's like when I have a deeper personal experience without cannabis, it's just deeper than with cannabis, because cannabis gives it's like the vibration of the plant is always with you, the spirit of the plant is with you, and it's just me, and me meaning like, well, it's not just, I don't know, it's just a different experience obviously, but
no filters.
Exactly. Word, that's the word. I was gonna say ends or something, but like there's no filter. Exactly.
And no buffer is another way to think of it too.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So one's not better than the other, but for me personally, when I've had a deep non-cannabis float, it's usually more profound.
It's amazing for sure. And one thing I wanted to also say is that before you popped on, I kind of shared a little bit with Rachel and or whoever ends up listening to our chat with you, was the extreme benefits of how floating benefited me at the time that I was more active within that as part of my self-care. Both you and your brother giving me an ability to be part of your space briefly as an employee, and then continuing that as a representative of your community through marketing, through ambassador, and through being in the space. And those times were extremely pivotal in my own self-discovery of who I was, and learning what my needs were and how to access my body in ways that maybe hadn't been prior. So I give you and your brother a shout out, not just to myself, but to those that you did open up your space to provide them the ability in ways that might have been a barrier for them to access what that kind of experience was. And I've been thinking about, Float House probably for the last year and a bit, to be honest, and wanting to be back there and wanting to be in the space a bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw me coming in a little bit more in the future, because I definitely need it. My body and my brain are fried, and I couldn't think of a better time than the pandemic to give back for anyone to give back to themselves. through
Mhm.
floating and through other forms of self-care like that. Just that extra bit of touch that no matter what you do on your own time, there's something that floating can provide the body and the mind that your own manual therapy just doesn't compare to that, you know. So
Well,
it's very powerful.
Yeah.
well, thank you for sharing that. And it's not. I've heard that from many different people, and that's probably one of the things that when this chapter of my
Mm.
life is done, I'll probably reflect on a lot more. It's just like those stories that I have heard from people getting incredible value of this, using that space at very unique points in their lives, like
Yeah.
and that happens a lot with our employees who have worked with us, who work with us and who have worked with us in the past. Is they've kind of come into floating and Float House at a unique spot in their life, and we're very open, and we encourage our employees to float as much as possible so they can connect to it authentically and share that connection with our patrons. And um, and 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 they use it a lot, and a lot of them have used it to just work through different eras of their lives. And
Oh
so
yeah.
and I'm sure that's happened even more than I'm aware of. And that's I think when I look back on this phase of my life, I'll be very I think it's gonna be very humbling and very like powerful to be like, wow, like it really did help people
Oh,
in a unique way, and I
absolutely.
kind of get tied up in the details of it all now. And I don't get to kind of zoom out as much to reflect on that, but I do believe that will be probably the bigger things that I do take with me after this chapter's done.
Hmm. Well said.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, will this be out before the end of December?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Because yeah, we have some really awesome promos going on right now, so you can check them out on our floathouse.ca page in Vancouver.
Love
Amazing
it.
offer to get into floating. Like, I could throw a promo code out, but these are better than promo codes. So great.
Awesome.
So like, yeah, if you're in December, go check it out because there's some good deals going.
Oh, I'll try to.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna try to get it out by even next week. So I think that's
Cool.
great.
Yeah.
And well, that's actually like almost a perfect kind of wrapping up of this whole gift that we're giving people right now. Is there anything you want to add that you haven't already? And I know, how many locations do you have now? Actually, that's a question I have.
Yeah, well, my brother and I, we own and operate one location in Vancouver. We
Okay.
did that we closed down a few years ago. The lease was up there, and we just decided to consolidate down at that time. But there's two locations on the island that my cousin runs. One in
Wow.
one in Victoria, one in Langford, and there's Float House Abbotsford and Float House Edmonton. So they're all independently owned and operated. Great people that just love floating, believe in it, and are sharing it with their communities. So if you're watching this from one of those places, definitely check them out, give them support. And also, if you're checking this out from another place, just go on flotationlocations.com. There's probably a float center near you if you're curious to try it out, and give it a shot. Because it is a great, unique environment to explore. It's not for everybody, but I believe it could be. It's really powerful. So
I could not
Amazing.
agree more. We had one I'm in Vernon actually. There was, yeah. And I think when I first moved here about almost 5 years ago, there was one, and then they had to close very sadly. She couldn't make a go of it. But,
it's
and
a
I remember, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
tough little business, like, and even in Vancouver, there's many shops that have come and gone.
Mhm.
And it's rough because the owners have gotten into it because they just have a passion, and
Yeah.
it makes so much sense. It's like, yes, of course we need to disconnect a little bit. We're so hyper connected and got a lot of distractions at the touch of our fingers. We need this space to really disconnect. So it makes a lot of sense, but
It does.
it's just very challenging. We're kind of competing with everything else that distracts us. You know what I mean? And sometimes people do have resistance and want to avoid that. But I do believe that most people will come to it when they need it the most. Like, it's not like maybe you don't need. Maybe you're in a good space and you're okay and you have your self-care going, or it just hasn't come across your radar. But I do believe that people will find it when they need to find it. It's right there. And, those little synchronicities of a friend mentioning it, or you just catch it online or something, who knows, right? Like, those are the little messages of like, oh, maybe there's something here to explore.
Hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to did mention actually with COVID, I'm sure this is a bit harder, but do you have any idea of maybe hosting certain kinds of events that would combine the gifts of floating and wellness with other forms of modalities? Do you want to create more of that in the new year once COVID might lift enough to allow those kind of shared community spaces where people and culture have maybe been lacking that, and sometimes those spaces of calm spaces connect people together? Have you wanted to create anything like that, or keep it purely based on one's own experience and coming in and out for their appointment and for their session?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've kind of dabbled in different ways in the past on that, and I think definitely there's a great opportunity to have group experiences
Mm,
focused on many different things, whether it's art related or or meditation or dream work or
mm,
whatever it is, different healing practices or group work, like or business collaboration or creative thinking, whatever.
yeah.
There's many opportunities that although floating is this isolated individual activity, we have many devices. We have 6 tanks, and a group of people can come in to maybe have a group intention, but then go have their individual experiences and then reconvene to share and to talk and to
That's
open up,
true.
because floating does definitely shift your vibration. It shifts your awareness, and then coming out and sharing that and knowing that everyone has kind of been in that same their own personal vibration of floating
Hmm.
together, I think is really powerful. So I think there's tremendous opportunities to have, whether it's us leading them or other community leaders bringing in groups to just lead it out of our facility. I think, we're definitely open to all that type of collaboration as well.
Great.
Absolutely. I
There you go.
cannot wait to see what happens and what transpires for you. And I'm sure they're all great things. And I'm very much looking forward to following you.
Yeah. And
And
I say, like, we do have hot cold contrast therapy, which we didn't really get into,
right. Yeah, we didn't. That's true.
but this is a quick little pitch. It's a 60-minute session. We have an infrared sauna, and it's a private room shower, infrared sauna, and this cold plunge. So, I mean, you probably see
Yeah, yeah.
cold water immersion right now. It's like the hot thing to do. No pun intended.
Wim Hof. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's yeah.
Awesome. I mean, it is one of my favorite things to do is to do hot cold contrast therapy. You come out of that thing feeling like you could, you can fly. Like you feel like it's really good for pain management, tension, stress. It's incredible. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's a
Awesome.
very, very good experience as well.
Fantastic. That's great to remind. And you're right, it is very much on the trend right now, but I think it'll be a staple and not be just trendy. I think it's going to stay around just because it's
Totally.
accessible and people know
The,
about it.
I
the
think so
proof is in the
too.
pudding. Yep.
Well, think
Mhm.
about think about even, I know we're kind of blabbing again, but think about like the Scandinave spa. Like, I mean,
Right.
that's the Scandinave's been around for ages. And that culture, I mean, the culture, that whole thing's been around for freaking eons, right? So
Yeah.
it's just something
Yeah.
that, us in North America were only maybe introduced to not as long ago, but I don't think it's gonna go away. It's
Right.
just gonna be
Mhm.
another
Okay.
staple.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, hot and cold. They're both elemental medicines, right?
Yep.
Like the indigenous people of this land would have their sweat lodges,
Mhm.
and who
Yep.
knows, maybe they'd go and plunge in a river after that. You know what I mean? Like it's a no-brainer. And so I think that was definitely a part of many cultures for a long time, and there's good reason, because it feels amazing, and actually it can become a spiritual practice in itself. Your energy gets shifted so much, and even you can think of it scientifically. The vibrations, when something's heated, they're moving faster. All the particles and electrons are
That's
moving
true.
faster. When it's cold, they slow down. And but when we start to oscillate between fast slow, hot cold, it starts to just move your energy, just like breath work, just like yoga does, right? It's
I
a
was
different
just
way
gonna
of
say.
moving energy. And so, using the hot and cold elements to move the energy, and then sitting in that and being with that when you go back to the sauna, or when you're in the cold, you should try to meditate in both of the environments. Cold's obviously harder to meditate in, but you can go really deep in meditation with cold. It's powerful.
You know what? You just made me realize like why Wim Hof's breathing technique is so intense, because it is. And have you done his breathing technique as well that, yeah. So, and it's almost like hyperventilation in a sense, right? But it is that extreme. It's those extremes, right? And then you find the peace, you find the calm, you get the hot and cold, like you just said. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. So that's a little, like, and I've heard this term tossed out there from a different center, and I think I really like it. It's this transformational medicine, and there's lots of things that can transform you, and lots of things that can shift your energy and vibration. But I really think that's a term that I really resonate with now. It's like transformational medicine, being proactive, and using these holistic modalities to bring your being into optimization, and doing these stressors of intensity to rebalance your system. I think like this is the future of health and wellness for sure. Not just us, but like just these holistic modalities. We're going to find they're going to be way better than any reactive medicine. I mean, use that when you have to, obviously.
Yeah.
But this proactive medicine is that's going to be the protocol in the future. I think everyone's habits are going to be transitioning that way.
Right. Well, one last thing, because it's interesting that you talk about, and it's so cliche and silly to say, but the future really is now, because, for example, a few months back, we had a doctor on the show, a psychiatrist, and Dr. Rachel Yehuda from the Mount Sinai Hospital or University in New York. And she was talking about, being a psychiatrist or psychologist, oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher it now, for so many years, and specifically studying the generational trauma for Holocaust survivors and how it's intergenerational, as passed down. And what they're doing now in her clinic is all about microdosing. And, that's what they're doing. They're trying to treat patients from, PTSD and all those kinds of things, and intergenerational trauma with that type of, holistic, that modality that you're talking about right now. So it's that future, like it's all happening right now. And
absolutely,
it's gonna catch on like wildfire. It already kind of has, but
definitely. Well,
exciting. Yeah.
It depends on like what you're exposed to. It's I think for anyone that's kind of internet based with their media consumption, it's like, oh yeah, this is all happening. But for the populations that are more, let's just say, corporate media based and legacy media based, that's
true.
It's kind of getting peppered out there. It's eking in there a little bit, but so, and that's the demographic thing. You know what I mean? So obviously, like it's there is that divide to a degree. There's lots of crossover, obviously, but it'll get out there more, and it's only going to grow more, and which is good. It's going to make healthier people, holistically healthier people, and that's what we all need. Because if we all can be healthier individually, well, I think collectively we'll also be healthier as well.
Amen.
Agreed.
We can that's a really good way to end the conversation, I think.
Yeah. So thank you so much for taking the time. In fact, you and your brother were two of the first people that I actually said to Rachel, and Rachel can attest to that. That said, I really want to have the Zarembas on the show. I think it would be a perfect kind of full circle with them having their own podcast back in the day, and their relationship with me in the past and our development. So kind of meant to be that we've been around for a year and a half now, and it's nice to have you.
Year and a half. You're just adding a few months on, hey? I'm just teasing.
Whatever. Anyways, it's great to have you on, and I know how busy and everything is going on, especially with your additional life and things happening right now. So thank you for giving us your time.
My pleasure.
And it's nice to see you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I appreciate that time. And good luck with everything you guys got going on. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
It's back on a podcast, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Shoot you those links when they're out.
Awesome.
Take care, Mike.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.